I'm starting recording.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Vote by Mail Task Force meeting. Sorry about that. My screen just froze, but live and learn. My name is Rose Colasino. I'm the co-state coordinator at Indivisible, Illinois, and the Voting Rights and Protection Chair. I'm also the lead and founder of this group, the Vote by Mail Task Force. Our group focuses on advocating for voting rights on the federal, state, and local level. My particular activism started with the release of, yes, the Indivisible Guide that went viral after the 2018 election. We're proud to be part of the Indivisible network of crusaders. We are very excited and honored to have Ezra Levin on with us tonight, one of the authors of the guide. He is co-founder, of course, and co-director of Indivisible National. The focus of our meeting tonight is what's next with voting rights? I want to know, and I'm sure you want to know too. We all fought in fact, extremely hard for the passage of the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act, and were quite disappointed, crushed in my case, by the outcome. I know some people expected it, but still, we look forward to counsel with Ezra. We will turn it over to him shortly, I promise. But before that, here's a really quick rundown of the agenda. First, after we hear from Ezra, we will share our work and receive his input and hopefully input from the audience on our strategy and our actions. It is through, of course, collaboration between state, regional, and national organizations and partner organizations that we would be successful on this challenging road to 2022. But I've got to tell you, the more I hear, it's actually looking a little more promising, but I don't want to jinx us. Ezra will tell us more. Second, we will take questions for Ezra. I know you have lots and lots of questions for Ezra. I certainly do myself. I ask our attendees so we can get through our full agenda to please stay muted and to put any questions that you might have in our friendly chat. Now over to Lenny Mcgrath, Indivisible Illinois State Lead and co-founder, to introduce Ezra.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Rose. As Rose mentioned, my name is Lenny Mcgrath. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the co-founder and co-state coordinator with Rose and Scott Cross for Indivisible Illinois. And I have the pleasure to introduce Ezra to you today. So Ezra, along with Leah Greenberg, is the co-founder and co-executive director of Indivisible Project, and also the co-author of the Indivisible Guide, as well as this book, We Are Indivisible, a blueprint for democracy after Trump. So despite the many naysayers 5 years ago, including some who said to them that the guide that they wrote was a little too dark, Ezra and Leah forged ahead with the plan to get this Indivisible Guide, which is the practical guide to resist the Trump agenda, into as many grassroots hands as possible. And this idea of distributing good information and powerful tools across the nation into hands of local community organizers has really been the running theme of Indivisible ever since they started 5 years ago. And for me personally, Ezra's voice has been a true lifeline. You can find him everywhere, including Twitter, and also on MSNBC with Rachel Maddow. And with that, I am very, very excited to see you again, Ezra. Thank you for being here. And to all who are here, maybe for the first time, welcome. I hope that you stay and I hope you come back. And with that, I'm so excited to present to you Ezra Levin.
Thank you for that introduction, Lenny, and Rose, thank you too. Gosh, Lenny, I don't know how many events like this we've done together. I've lost count, it's been so much. I want to keep this as conversational as possible, so I will I'll talk a little bit about the subject at hand, which is what has happened, what's the immediate future look like, what's the more medium term look like from our point of view. But I really do want as much Q&A as possible. We just ran a 4-year campaign against the filibuster. You don't want to hear me just blather on for hours on end. So I'll cover a few of these topics, but please let's have as much back and forth as we possibly can. And Lenny, you're reminding me of those immediate emails we got. So there were a handful of emails we got when we put out the original guide and we tweeted it out. And I mean, it said quite starkly that Trump was an unfit president. He was looking to remake America in his mold, in his image, and that if we were going to stop this, we were going to have to band together, all of us, all together, all across the country, stand up and put pressure on our elected officials, make sure that they represented us. And I do remember getting some responses saying, well, geez, this sounds pretty dark. Is it really that bad? Is Trump, maybe we can reach across the aisle and cut some deals with the Republicans. But those were almost a footnote in the barrage of emails and messages that we got from folks who said, oh my gosh, I just got a handful of people together and now we're Indivisible Tallahassee, or we're Indivisible Albany, or Indivisible Austin. And that was incredible. And look, the reason why I'm still here talking with you all 5 years later is not because of some guide that we put out 5 years ago. It's because of the work that you all have been doing to build up the power in your communities, which is laddered up nationwide to some pretty incredible stuff. And I think the left, progressives, pro-democracy movement broadly isn't great at celebrating victories. And the reason is because we've never get a final victory. We're never going to solve politics. I'm sorry if I'm the one bearing that news for you all, but we're not going to solve this in the next week, in the next year, in the next several decades. This isn't a problem that gets solved. This is a problem that we just engage with, and it's engaging with it that we're able to inch closer to justice. So I don't want to just glide over what all we accomplished in this fight. I remember 3.5, 4 years ago when we were first talking about the filibuster with folks, people just, if they weren't snickering at us, they were certainly looking askance at the fact that we were talking about this issue. When we did our national convening in 2019, the focus was both democracy reform and this issue of the filibuster, how we were going to get by it. I remember we were meeting with presidential candidates, a whole bunch of them, in 2018 and 2019. I remember sitting down with Elizabeth Warren, who's brilliant and had tons of plans and what she was going to talk about. And we asked her point blank about the filibuster. What are you going to do about the filibuster? She was not yet ready to take a position on the filibuster as of sometime in 2018. And she became a real leader on it, as did many other senators and candidates after that. But it's amazing where we got, which is we dragged kicking and screaming 98% of the Democratic Party along with us. And today, I do not think you can win a Democratic primary for the Senate without saying you're for abolishing the filibuster, without saying you're going to fight like hell for voting rights. That's where we are now. It's not everywhere we wanted to get. And look, I think we're all equally crushed by this legislative defeat. I won't say I'm more crushed than anybody else, but I put my heart and soul into this fight for several years. And it's terrible to get that close. We got within 2 Senate votes of actually amending the filibuster and passing generation-defining democracy reform. And also, and I wrote this right after the fight, had we won that legislative fight, the fight for democracy would continue. The fact that we lost that particular legislative fight means the fight for democracy continues. We have to keep building, because the opportunity that the other side is taking advantage of is to rig the rules and entrench their power and implement a system of authoritarian rule that disregards the results of the elections, doesn't even run free and fair elections. We know that. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. We see this happening in real time in Arizona, in Georgia, in Texas, in Florida. It's happening everywhere. So that gives us one option. If we're not going to throw in the towel, and that means we just got to keep on building. I know y'all did incredible work as well. I remember thinking early on in this fight, I don't know where Dick Durbin is going to be. I don't know if he's going to come out swinging on this, if he's going to be ultimately on our side. I was looking out at the early quotes from early last year, and your senators were saying, well, the options are on the table, but they weren't actually committing at that point. So when I think about not just the Manchin and Sinema aspect of this, but the Hickenlooper and Bennett in Colorado, or Coons and Carper in Delaware, or Dianne Feinstein in California, these were all on our target list. These were all dominoes that we thought, oh gosh, we got to get these folks on board. Otherwise, we're not going to have any shot. hopefully we'll be able to get them. Y'all did that. You all did that. And I really don't want to move on and just say, okay, here's what's next without appreciating the enormous accomplishment of pulling the entirety of the Democratic ecosystem minus 2 senators over to our side. It's not everything we wanted, but that it sets us up with a foundation to build on as we move forward, and move forward is what we've got to do. That is the option in front of us. I've been talking with, over the course of the last week or so, I've been calling Indivisible leaders, which has been just incredible. I talked with people in New Jersey and Massachusetts and Missouri and Michigan, New Mexico, Colorado, Washington, California, all over, red states, blue states, purple states, people who have been throwing themselves into this fight just like you all have been, just like you all have been, just like I have been. They're all crushed. They were all crushed by this. They were all hoping against hope that we were going to get Sinema and Manchin ultimately. And also, to a person, they said, it's terrible. I guess we just got to keep on building. Here's what we're doing at the state and local level. Oh, but here's our plan for a statewide convening to get in new volunteers to do voter contact for 2022. And here's what we're thinking about voter suppression. And this, y'all, I think of, there's so much that I love and appreciate and I'm proud of within the Indivisible movement, but, the extent to which we are practical about the challenges in front of us. I know that maybe that's not as inspiring a thing to everybody else, but we don't gloss over how difficult the challenges are in front of us. We don't act as if the catastrophe that is right in front of us isn't actually there. We call it like it is. And then we say, well, this is what you can actually do. This is what you can actually do, because that's all we can do. Nobody's going to wave a magic wand. There's no knight in shining armor riding in to save us. It's all up to us, and we got the choice of how we're going to show up. So that's what we're going to do going forward. Now, in the immediate term, what we have is a trifecta still, a Democratic trifecta, which can be used to its fullest extent. It can pass legislation like a big economic package. Looks like Build Back Better. It could pass something like the Electoral Count Act, which would reform some aspects of the law that pose a danger to us in 2024. Not everything. Happy to answer questions on that, both in terms of the substance of it and the current negotiations in Congress. And the president can issue executive orders, both on democracy, but also on student loan, also on other economic issues that can help build us up for the midterms and that do a lot of good for the world, for the country, and for all of us. At the end of the day, though, at this year, we shouldn't build up too much what this loss was. Had a Senate candidate in North Carolina not had an affair and sent some bad text messages to during the campaign, we probably would have won the North Carolina seat, and we probably would have reformed the filibuster, and we probably would have passed this bill. We got within 2 votes of reforming the filibuster and passing this. There were pickup opportunities in the Senate in Wisconsin, in North Carolina, in Pennsylvania, in Florida, in Missouri, in Iowa. We are not defending as much as the Republicans are. Yes, we're defending New Hampshire, we're defending Georgia, we're defending Arizona, we're defending Nevada. But the Senate map isn't that bad for us. And as Rose mentioned earlier, as bad as the gerrymandering looked early on, it's actually been looking increasingly better for us as we head into the final maps that we're seeing, because the Republicans gerrymandered as much as they possibly could in 2010. So it was really hard to squeeze much more juice out of that lemon. So there's a real shot. Are we the favorites to win in 2022? Are we absolutely going to pick up seats in the Senate and hold the House? No, we're not. But there is a real path to victory there. And the path to victory means holding on to the votes that we got in 2018 and 2020. It's really as simple as that. And I want to underline this point. There were 42 million new voters in 2018 and 2020 for the Democrats. 42 million. People who had never voted before, 42 million voted in 2018. It was about 25 million, and then another 17 million in 2020. If all we do this year is get the same people out who voted in 2018 and 2020, we win. I can make that statement affirmatively. We win. It's that simple. The challenge is not, hey, how do we convince the Trump voters to come over to our side? Or how do we get that person who never voted before, but I know agrees with us, to come over to our side? There will be some of that, but the primary challenge is do what we accomplished in 2018 and 2020, which means what did we do in 2018 and 2020? Indivisible alone contacted somewhere in the order of 60 or 70 million voters nationwide in those two election cycles. It was a massive voter turnout operation. And there's no silver bullet here either. Voters talking to voters, we know, is the single best thing you can possibly do. That's what we're driving to do. If we manage to hold the House, expand the Senate by a couple of votes, we got another shot at the democracy legislation. And not just that piece of democracy legislation, but DC statehood, Puerto Rico self-determination, Electoral Count Act reform. We can do all of these things because we'll actually have the votes to get through the filibuster. Not going to say it's easy. It's not easy. And we're not even favored by the political prognosticators who are professionally employed in DC, but we weren't favored by them when we were fighting against the ACA repeal. We weren't favored by them when we were trying to take the House of Representatives. We weren't favored by them when we were trying to take the Senate in Georgia last year. The prognosticators are wrong all the time. The only thing that really matters is what we do. So that's what we're going to do. Now, I'm happy to talk more about what's at the federal level, what's happening on the Indivisible's electoral program, and what I'm seeing around the country when I'm talking to folks who are organizing. But fundamentally, I hope you all understand, one, we're not starting from ground zero. We're not starting from the very beginning again. We've pushed the ball forward quite a bit, not as far as we wanted to, but quite a bit. Two, we've got a real shot to actually hold our majorities and expand them in the midterms. There are several reasons for that, and we can get into greater detail. And three, there's stuff that we all can do, both in Illinois and nationwide. And we're going to be doing with Indivisible National whatever we can to support that work. I think that was long enough, Lenny, for me to just talk at people. I don't like just talking at people. I like to be in conversation. So if that's okay, can we just jump into the Q&A and the back and forth?
Okay, there are questions in the chat.
Oh, great. Okay. People can just, let's do, it can be messy if we don't have a stack. So do people want to just raise their hand, actually, if you have a question, and I'll just call on you?
Well, there are some in the chat already.
In the chat.
Yes,
Great.
yes. The first one is Betsy Rubin has one first.
Great.
What's next and what's possible for voting rights and election protection legislation?
So the big possibility at the federal level right now is it's called ECA reform, the Electoral Count Act reform. Now, to be clear, this bill does not do anything to prevent the voter suppression legislation or to roll back the voter suppression legislation that we've seen pass in Georgia and Texas and Arizona and other GOP states. It doesn't do anything to beat back gerrymandering. What it does is specifically focuses on, once the votes have been cast, whatever votes those may be, once those votes have been cast, here is how we will count the votes and certify the results. So this squabble between Pence and Trump, for instance, where Pence is saying, oh, I didn't have the authority to overturn the election, and Trump is saying he did have the authority. This is meant to clarify, no, he doesn't actually have the authority. Here is how you actually count the votes. So it is a good piece of legislation. It likely would have been inserted into the Freedom to Vote Act if the Freedom to Vote Act actually made it to get to a vote and through the amendment process. That's what everybody had been planning to do. It is so narrow in scope that that's why we could hope to get Republicans on board with it. And that is ultimately how it will probably pass if it does pass. It will be a bipartisan effort, which means it needs 10 Republican votes. And if you're hearing me, you're like, 10 Republican votes, how the hell is that going to happen? That's a good question. I think it is far from certain that the Republicans will actually do this. They initially started offering it as an option when the Freedom to Vote Act looked like it was picking up steam, because Mitch McConnell is very good at his job. He wanted to hold out as a possibility, oh, we can work on this bipartisan piece of democracy legislation in order to attract Manchin and Sinema's attention. And that was successful. I think Mitch McConnell often then pulls out the rug. He's loosey with the football. He'll pull up the football as soon as you go and kick. It's still a worthwhile effort. We are happy that there are negotiations happening. It remains to be seen if they're real or not. Frankly, there isn't a ton of work for Indivisibles to do on this right now because this is a bipartisan effort. If I go out on MSNBC or write a big op-ed about how ECA reform is the most important thing, that's not going to convince Susan Collins to come on board. Mitch McConnell isn't going to like that. So the unfortunate reality is we're in in this moment, we are letting those negotiations take place. They are trying to hammer out a deal. And should they come up with some deal, we'll be cheering, we'll be clapping, we'll be excited. But we are not twisting arms to get there. There was a pathway with twisting arms to get to a Democratic only vote on the Freedom to Vote Act. That's what we were trying to do. For this bill, it's just an entirely different political dynamic. Now, separate from that, there are efforts at the state level to engage in either expanding the right to vote or fighting back against the worst of the Republican voter suppression efforts. So we're seeing that in Republican states like Arizona right now, where after the Freedom to Vote Act failed, after it was voted down, we saw Republicans in Arizona immediately start to push forward new state level voter suppression legislation. So we're working with Indivisibles in Arizona to push back against that. In some cases, we are actually having success. We're defeating some of the pieces of legislation. In other cases, it's moving forward. So there is state level legislative campaign going on right now on these issues. But at the end of the day, we are not going to be able to pass any sort of substantial federal democracy reform legislation unless you get 2 new votes in the Senate and hold the House, and of course still have the presidency. That's the only pathway, because Mitch McConnell will crawl on his hands and knees over broken glass to prevent any kind of anti-election subversion legislation from getting through the Senate, and he'll be successful. And that's putting aside DC statehood, Puerto Rico self-determination, reforming the Supreme Court, all of these things that we think is necessary are necessary for safeguarding democracy. Does that answer? Any follow-ups on that?
Betsy, does that answer your question? Betsy? Well, we can go to the next question.
Great.
Okay. Linda Wasey has a question. What are the plans on sitting down with Manchin, with other Democratic leaders, and coming up with compromise on voting rights that will pass the Senate?
Yeah, so with Manchin, the issue actually ended up not being the substance of the legislation. We were in pretty close contact with the folks who were drafting the legislation, and the original bill was the Freedom to Vote Act, of course, or no, sorry, the For the People Act. That was what HR1 S1 was, and the For the People Act was what Joe Manchin came out at some point last year in the summer and said, well, I'm not for that. I'm not going to do that, even though he had been a co-sponsor in the previous Congress. But he had come out against that. And for a few weeks, everybody said, oh, democracy reform is dead. Nothing's going to move forward. Then Schumer and the Senate Democrats said, okay. What do you want? What do you approve of, Mr. Manchin? We will let you draft much of this bill. Tell us what you want. And what came out of that process was the Freedom to Vote Act, which frankly was a pretty darn good bill. It was a pretty darn good bill, and it remains a pretty darn good bill if it gets brought up in the next Congress. It did much of what the For the People Act did, and then in fact added a few things. It made voting day a national holiday. It inserted some anti-election subversion provisions that would have helped prevent a coup in 2024. So Manchin held the pen on that and wrote it and supported it. He was a co-sponsor of it. So the substance of the bill was not the problem. We had 50 Democratic senators and Vice President Harris saying, we're for this, we're going to vote for it. The problem was the filibuster, is always the filibuster. He has been unwilling to amend the filibuster. And as long as you're unwilling to amend the filibuster, 50 votes isn't enough. You need 60 votes, which means you need Mitch McConnell, which means it's not going to happen. So that the pathway to any sort of democracy reform in the absence of filibuster reform is there's got to be some kind of bipartisan negotiation. And that's exactly what's theoretically happening right now with the ECA reform. There are 5 Republicans meeting with several Democrats to discuss the legislation that they could all agree to. Now, 5 Republicans, you might know, is not 10 Republicans. You need 10. We'll see if they get there. We'll see if they get there, but that is the path forward on any kind of democracy legislation in the Senate this year. That is it, and we are waiting to see whether it shakes out. I would say 2 things. One, I wouldn't hold my breath for that. If it does shake out, great. We should all be celebrating it, but I wouldn't count on it. And 2, even if we get this through, just to underline again, this doesn't suddenly save democracy. It doesn't even suddenly prevent a coup of some sort. All it does is fix a few problems around how you count the votes. That's important to do. Again, not to say we shouldn't do that. It's just there is no substitute for a mass pro-democracy movement in this country, because there is not legislation coming this year to prevent the kind of election subversion and the kind of voter suppression that we're seeing in GOP states. The only alternative to that, unfortunately, is we all got to do the work.
Okay. There's a few more questions, and we'll do questions for about another 8 minutes or so because we have more. The next question is from Catherine Abreu. With voter suppression, will that impact negatively our ability to get the same amount of votes out as in 2018 and 2020?
Yes, yes, it will. And that's the intent, to be clear. So the Republicans understand that there was a massive blue wave in 2018 and that they lost in 2020, and they didn't like that. The reason for this wave of voter suppression legislation that you're seeing in all these GOP controlled states is because they recognize they're losing. They recognize they're losing, folks. That's why they're passing it. They are actively trying to make it harder for our voters to vote. That is what they are doing. Now, they can't make it impossible for our voters to vote. They're making our lives harder. Now, I was very critical of the White House when they said, oh, we've just got to out-organize the voter suppression. I think that is putting the onus too much on organizers. This is why we were fighting for federal legislation to actually level the playing field. You'll note that in Virginia, there were free and fair elections in that election, and Democrats still lost. They lost, even though there were free and fair elections. So we are not fighting to strengthen the Democratic Party. This isn't a Democratic Party effort. This is an effort to strengthen democracy and just democracy. But the Republicans are fighting to strengthen their own party. That is what they're doing. But the Republicans are going to do what they're going to do. I think of a 1980 quote by one of the co-founders of the Heritage Foundation, which is one of the core organizations that became part of the New Right around Reagan. And he said, look, frankly, I don't want everybody to vote. Our candidates do better when the voting populace goes down. So we shouldn't act as if the Republican attempts to gut the Voting Rights Act or to make it more difficult for young people and people of color to vote as if that's something new. That's a game they've always played. Now, I would have liked to pass legislation to make our lives easier, but they haven't suddenly won by virtue of doing this. They've just tilted it a little bit in their favor, and we've got to overcome that. That's the only option in front of us.
Next is Leslie Lapping. Are you concerned about today's Supreme Court decision regarding the Alabama redistricting map in 2022?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not concerned with it. I'm not concerned with it because in some way it means that we've lost the House or they've just delivered it. I think the reason to be concerned with it is because it is the latest and greatest, I don't know if I call it greatest, the worst indication that the Supreme Court has been packed by right-wing anti-democracy ideologues who are intent on, supporting Trumpism and undermining democracy with their opinions. So it's hard to describe just how extreme this opinion was, but maybe the best way to describe it is that John Roberts, a man who joined the Reagan administration in order to gut the Voting Rights Act, and then when he was put on the Supreme Court, gutted the Voting Rights Act in his Shelby County v. Holder opinion back in 2013. That man sided with the liberal justices in the minority against this opinion because he thought it went too far in supporting the Republican gerrymander. So this is a bad decision, but I would be prepared, if I were y'all, to see much more of this from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court this summer is taking up affirmative action. They're taking up Roe. They're taking up many cases that are going to be blockbusters. And there are, at the very least, 5 extremist conservatives on the court. So one question for this group is, when these bad cases come down, if they are as bad as we believe they're going to be, we all know this. Everybody on this call, we've got around 50 people on this call. I'm sorry to break the news, y'all, but we're the weird ones. We're the people who are spending our Monday night talking about democracy, talking about Congress, talking about the Supreme Court. Most of America is not talking about that. They're not spending their weekend or weeknights talking about these things. Our challenge is when something big happens and some number of people lift their heads up, they say, oh my gosh, that's actually really bad. How are we as Indivisible in Illinois or in other states, how are we grabbing them in and say, yeah, this is bad. Here's what you can do about it. The big thing that we've got to do is we got to get the Senate. We need you in, make some calls, send some texts, write some postcards, knock on some doors. How are we doing that? We can prepare right now for those Supreme Court decisions that are coming. We know they're coming right now. So how are we preparing for that moment? So does this particular case scare me? It doesn't directly impact my optimism for being able to hold the House, even though it's a bad decision for Alabama and it could be replicated in other places. It doesn't surprise me that this court would do this. It's more a confirmation that this court is indeed as bad as it is. It's why we all fought against Barrett. It's why we all fought to win the Senate majority so that we could get a good new justice now that Biden has a chance to nominate somebody.
Okay, there's one, we only have time for one more question, and the next one is Rosie Rees. The New York Times reported on how many Democratic states, including Illinois, are gerrymandered voting districts, just like Republicans. What do we say to our members when we say Dems oppose gerrymandering?
Dems are, look, I would love to pass a law protecting Republican districts from gerrymandering. And I would love to see Republicans join on to that law. It was called the Freedom to Vote Act. They had the opportunity to do it. I oppose gerrymandering, but I sure as hell am not going to unilaterally disarm why we've got a right-wing authoritarian movement undermining democracy across the country. We're not going to just say, yeah, you can take it. I would love to end gerrymandering, and any Republican that wants to link arms with me on it, great, I'm there. But as long as they're doing what they're doing, it would be ridiculous for us to say, oh, we're just going to bring flowers to the knife fight. And just there was a question from Richard on minimum Senate seats to win is 2 additional seats. Yeah, it's just 2. It's just 2. You get 2 and that's enough, because then you could lose Sinema and Manchin and still have enough for Harris to break a tie on filibuster reform. So you really just need 2. And I would say that we're, at roughly favored or equal in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, and have a real shot in North Carolina, Florida, maybe even Iowa.
Ezra, thank you so much. And you are a hard act to follow, but I will do my best. And I want to let everyone know, I know there's probably 101 more additional questions for Ezra. I probably have 50% of them. But the way we set this up with Ezra is that Grassroots Illinois will have a collaborative event with Grassroots National. So I am going to try to speak clearly but quickly, so we can have some additional questions for Ezra. I realize and appreciate what time it is. So we do have some good stuff though for you, and we hope you will hang on. So that's the catch here. But here we go. Next slide, please. So I just want to tell you, Ezra, and this is the honest to God's truth, when the Senate vote came out that godforsaken day, actually, we had just heard from Cameron, as a matter of fact. Hi, Cameron, he's here, our national regional organizer for Illinois and a number of other states, Iowa, many others. And I felt some comfort, because I think that was the night that you put out a video about midnight. And also you wrote a really lengthy, I read most of it, email. And it most definitely did give me some hope. So I don't know if you realize that, but that's the truth. And your words today do give us inspiration, all of us. So what I'm going to do right now is share with you what we're doing at the grassroots level. And we are looking for what you said at the very top end. We are looking for some collaboration. So most definitely, not just Ezra, we would love to hear feedback and input from Ezra, but from everyone. If you can put your comments about what we're about to tell you in the chat, that would be phenomenal. Next slide. I want to start with a big picture here. And what we are seeing, as Ezra alluded to, is plain and simple, we are seeing voter suppression of Black, Brown, and the youth vote. Here is someone I follow very closely. I've been following since, I don't know, 2018 or so. Mark Elias. He writes for the Democracy Docket. He has Twitter Space every Thursday, Friday. Now that the legislation is kind of on hold, shall we say, Mark Elias is saving democracy. And so this particular article, I can put the link on here when we send it to you, but it was written by someone that's not really known to be a rebel-rouser. Her name is, you know her, Hillary Rodham Clinton. And I'm just going to paraphrase this article, but I do encourage you to read it. What we are facing is the fight of our lives in movement from a pluralistic, multiracial democracy toward a white supremacist authoritarianism. I do believe that, but that is written by Hillary Clinton. Next slide. Here's a real quick review of what I am going to speak about. We're going to talk about vote by mail because I get asked 10,000 times, why are you called vote by mail? I'm going to tell you. We will give you a quick timeline of our group, I promise. We're going to talk about the subgroups. We're going to talk about voting in regards to local voting rights, state voting rights, and federal. They're all important. Used to say we would do, 2-3 things really well. I now think we have to do more things really well. We will discuss our goals, what are expansion goals, and forgive us, we're going to talk about just a couple of accomplishments, and we do want you to stay in touch. We feel that by collaborating, that's how we're going to be successful. Next slide. All right, so here's just a little bit about why vote by mail. Lots and lots and lots of studies have been done. We have looked at 2020 and we feel really confident we made the decision to really forge ahead with vote by mail. And what the studies are telling us is that, quite frankly, we made the right choice. So studies show us that vote by mail does decrease inequities and increase turnout, which is exactly what I was hoping for. Next slide. What else? A couple more reasons. So it's more convenient, of course, to vote at home. Also, vote by mail can be drastically less expensive than setting up all those polling locations. We also know that it can be really challenging getting all the judges. Don't even start me on what's happening with election officials and judges and how they are being attacked and targeted. So please know, though, I know a lot of people really just it's a tradition. They want to go to the polling place. We are not advocating against that. We are just saying that our findings show us that vote by mail is very safe, very secure, and very accessible. And before the push for vote by mail with the onset of the pandemic, we advocated, and some of you have heard me say this 10,000 times, hand-marked paper ballots. A lot of the experts tell us, and let me tell you, I used to sell software, but they are telling us that hand-marked paper ballots is the way to go. That's the gold standard. That's what the cybersecurity experts are telling us. Next slide. So it always helps to talk about where we've been and where we're going. I'm going to tick through this quickly. These are some just phenomenal organizations. If you want to learn more about voting rights, first of all, the Secure Elections Network. It's actually quite a few of these groups in Secure Election Networks are Indivisible groups. That's how I got my start in learning about voting rights, and it's run by my good friend, Stephanie Chapman. We also received a lot of really great training and advice from, this isn't everybody, but Public Citizen, Brennan Center for Justice, and Verified Voting. So what we did in 2019, we formed a team. We got organized. That's the key, right, everybody? So we formed a team called Election Security Strategic Team, and we addressed more so voter protection. We were somewhat, I have to say, prescient in that. And then in 2020, as I mentioned, with the onset of the pandemic, I quite frankly was very concerned about people of color, people with disabilities getting out there and voting and putting themselves at risk. So 2020, March, give or take, is when we really started the push for that. We want to make sure that everybody has a voice to vote. In 21 was the launch of the Voting Rights Gazette. You're going to hear Terry talk about that. You are going to want to hear Terry talk about that. She has done a phenomenal job in educating voters, and I think that's the first step really before we activate them. As Ezra said, not everybody is like us. Not everybody is glued to the political news. In 22, what are we going to do? We're going to continue advocating on the federal, state, and local level, DC statehood. We're going to do it. We are not going to give up. Next slide. All right, there is a method to our madness here, and we do have the Vote by Mail Task Force. That's more or less the umbrella group, and then we have subgroups because there's a lot to do, as all of you know. So the first group I'm going to talk about is the voter analysis. Yes, we meet at this time, 8:30. All the kids are put to bed. Hopefully we have all of our other responsibilities taken care of. So we've been meeting on Mondays, and actually it was Fridays for the last 2 years. And this is where we set our strategy. We also have, and I have said this a couple of times, the reason why we created the Vote by Mail Task Force is for social justice. We wanted to make sure that all folks had the right to vote. The Voting Rights Gazette is its own entity, and also it has to be multifaceted, right? We need to canvass, we need to phone bank, we need to do all the things. We use social media, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but I will tell you that that did help us increase turnout, and it did help us with candidates. Next slide. So what we have here are the breakdown for local, state, federal. You know this, but I will tell you that as far as the Twitter storms helping us, we did work last April on municipal elections. We invited candidates. It was really phenomenal. And we feel that we were able to move the needle. As far as state, I think not all, but probably most of you are from Illinois. The best kept secret, yes, we've been able to vote by mail for a long, long time, but we have the capability now. Governor Pritzker just signed it to permanent vote by mail, and we need your help in making sure that everybody knows it. We again feel that this will help increase turnout. Federal level, we keep going. You know the story there. Next slide. So what are we going to do? Here are not all, but some of our goals. So we learned from another great organizer besides Ezra, the organizer by the name of Ben Wickler, the Wisconsin Democratic chair, that we need to engage voters year round. We're doing that in Illinois. We're also helping them do that in Wisconsin. We are promoting expanding voting rights and that permanent vote by mail list. We are showcasing our state. Boy, howdy, we know that there's a lot of states out there that are pushing voter suppression like nobody's business. And yes, because it works, they're attacking vote by mail. They're attacking drop boxes, but we want to showcase our state, our great state, as a model. Now, this next bullet here, this isn't just us from Vote by Mail Task Force. This is cybersecurity experts. This is public citizen. This is Brennan. This is what we understand that we need. We need a more transparent system. We need national standards. That's huge. A little bit of a yawner, but it is huge. And with that, we will get safe, secure, and accessible elections. Also, I will stop. I'll just tell you, strong messaging. Everybody that knows me knows that I can talk about messaging for an hour and a half, but that's key also. But to get Ezra, hopefully a couple more questions, we're going to skip over that. Next slide. So here's some of what we've accomplished. If you can go back a slide. Thank you. I'm almost done, everybody. So we're really proud of the effort that we had. We did this with Public Citizen. It wasn't just us, I'll say that right now, but we were able to garner $250 million for election security. It got us, Ed and Lenny and Annie and me, it got us a visit to Senator Durbin's office. We also created a website. Jonathan has personal issues this evening, but Jonathan did a banging job creating this website. We call it the Virus-Free Voting Illinois website. And I gotta tell you, sorry, ISPI, but I think they did a better job than the Illinois State Board of Elections, or I should say Jonathan did a better job. Twitter storms, over 60 million impressions. I'm quite proud of these last two things I wanna tell you about. We distributed with Lori. Hi, Lori, I think you're still out there. A lot of this was Lori. We distributed 8,000 voter registration and vote by mail placards in both English and Spanish. And this was an effort between Indivisible, Illinois. I think, Ezra, we were one of the first states, but we worked with National and we worked with Nick Yu at the time, and we were able to call 5,000 folks in underserved communities to make sure that they knew about all their options for voting. Next slide. This, some of you might be happy, is my last slide, but this is at least one of the most important slides. We want to make sure we stay in touch. We're not just saying, hey, stay in touch with us. We're saying all of us have to be in touch. It's kind of like, I'm thinking about these analogies in my head all the time. It's like an avalanche, a good one though. One that we can ski. Think of the Olympics. We have to stay in touch. We have to collaborate. We have to work with Poor People's Campaign. We have to work with Wisconsin Democrats. It has to be all of us in order to be successful, and we are going down this road. So we ask that you stay in touch with us on our Facebook, like our Voting Rights Gazette Facebook page. You will notice when Ed sends this to you, that all of these are workable links. We also have that banging newsletter that Terry puts out and just got produced. I won't take her thunder away, but it just got, we started it in August, I believe she tells us, and it is really getting vast exposure. Besides that, we have a Twitter account. We have a small but mighty team. We are actually fun. You might not think so, but we are fun. And we invite you to come back. That link that you use, that's actually the Zoom link in particular, the registration link, is the link to get into our meeting every Monday. So with that, thank you for your attention, and you won't want to miss what Ed has to say next.
Oh, I have to figure out how to turn off Spotlight here. Oh, let me do this first. Then I can remove Spotlight. Then I can put this back up again. Okay. Hi, my name's Ed Spire. I'm a member of NWSA Indivisible. I'm a co-chair with Rose of this group. I'm a suburban Chicago poll worker. I'm a deputy registrar. And we've been working together for several years now, promoting progressive election policies here in Illinois. And I'd like to tell you where we've been and what's going on right now. So in March of 2020, we had a primary election in Illinois, just as the pandemic was getting serious. That election faced many last-minute difficulties. There were changing polling locations, a severe shortage of poll workers, voters afraid to vote in person and all that. So after that bad experience of an election, we turned our attention in our group to improving the vote by mail process. We lobbied the 7 local election jurisdictions in the Chicago metro area, a few downstate counties, our state legislators, our governor, for improved vote by mail policies. And we promoted those vote by mail policies to the community. Now, we did get improved policies, but just for the November election. The election was very successful, had high turnout and high use of vote by mail. So then we continued working with these same groups to make those improved policies permanent and to expand them. We now have an improved policies on the books for future elections in Illinois, including a new permanent vote by mail list so that voters need not request a mail ballot for every election. Our efforts in this area continue because these new laws require some fine tuning. Specifically, at this time, it does not look like it will be easy to sign up for the permanent list at time of voter registration, and we need to fix that. So we continue to pursue policies that will move Illinois closer to universal vote by mail. We believe that's the right place to be. We already have one metro county here in the Chicago area that's well equipped to rapidly process high volumes of mail ballots, and another that's moving in that direction. Alas, our biggest election jurisdictions are not really in good shape on that front yet. So we still have some significant work to do in that direction, and that's one of our focuses. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Terry, who will talk about the Voting Rights Gazette.
Okay. Except I can't seem to get my video started. There it goes. Okay. I want to thank Rose for inviting Ezra to our meeting. The Voting Rights Gazette was conceived in April 2021 when Rose mentioned to me that most people, even activists, had no idea how many states were considering or passing voter suppression bills. I suggested we create a newsletter. It took 3 months, but on August 2nd, we had our inaugural issue, which at first was disseminated only to a small mailing list as a Google Doc. We're now reaching over 55,000 inboxes with every action, and more than 25% of recipients are opening the email to read it. So what are we covering? Anything to do with voting rights, voter suppression, attacks on election workers, you name it, wherever it occurs in the country. Our very first issue featured an article on one of the first instances of doxing and harassment of election workers last April in Anchorage. We've continued to cover this issue since, including in tomorrow's newsletter. In September, when the January 6th Commission first started looking at changing the Electoral Vote Count Act of 1887, we reported on it, as well as when Mitch McConnell brought it up last month before the big vote on the voting rights bills. We've covered not only legal challenges to Illinois' redistricting efforts, but also redistricting stories from Texas, Arizona, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and elsewhere. All 3 branches of Illinois government may currently be in Democratic hands, but we know we're always just one election away from that changing. And what happens in other states too often gets copied around the country. We don't want that to happen here. Our next issue comes out on every action tomorrow. but you can read it right now on the indivisibleil.com webpage. You can just scroll down to the very bottom of the homepage and look for the word blog and click on it. But to make it really easy, I will put the link in the chat. And now I'm going to turn this over to Jim Mcgrath, who will discuss his fight against school board disinformation.
Hi, my name is Jim Mcgrath. I am co-chair of this Combating Disinformation at School Board Meetings. So first, go ahead, first bullet. So we have had, we'll be doing our 7th installment coming up February 19th. We focus on the organizations that are creating all the disinformation and raucous at school board meetings. 2 of us attend school board meetings to make sure we know what's going on. Next bullet. A lot of these groups are nationally funded groups. They try to appear to be local grassroots groups. They have focused, they have said the way to winning in 2022 is through the school board. So that's why they are so focused on school boards. We had Proud Boys recently at a couple of our school board meetings. Next. We have a 1-hour Zoom meeting once a month on the 3rd Saturday. We have attendance from across Illinois and some other states. Go ahead, next bullet. We have on average from 40 to 70 to somewhat over 70 people at each meeting. Next meeting or next bullet. Recently, we partnered with Illinois Families for Public Schools. That was on January 27th. We had over 1,000 signups, over 650 people attended, and 13 states across the United States attended. Many people, when they registered, did not include their state. So I'm sure we had more than 13 there. We focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion on the 27th. We had an author, a state senator, a school director of DEI, and an educator. We always provide actions for every attendee. One of the concerns is the last bullet here, is when we attend these school board meetings, go ahead, the next bullet. Concern for safety of those who attend. One of the school board meetings that I attended, I had to have a police escort to get to my car because I supported masks and vaccinations. So we have to focus on school boards. I'm encouraging everybody to attend your school board meetings or attend our February 19th disinformation meeting. We will send out a link later so you can register for that. It's at noon on Saturday, 3rd Saturday of every month. Next speaker.
Hey, my name's Marcie Adelston Schaefer, and I lead the Indivisible Illinois phone banks. I'm also co-chair of the Indivisible Rural Illinois subgroup. Thanks, Ezra, for coming. You rock. And thanks, Rose, for everything you do. Without you, there would not be a vote by mail task force. When Nick Unijewski was our national organizer after January 6th, when Mary Miller said Hitler was right, if you have the youth, you have the future, he spearheaded a phone bank calling voters in the Illinois 15th to have them call her office to tell her to resign. We had a lot of volunteers that showed up and a lot of voters who agreed to write down her DC phone number and call. Since the Illinois 15 is part of rural Illinois, and I'm co-chair of the Indivisible Rural Illinois subgroup, I figured the rural group could do this with voters in other Republican-led congressional districts, and it could be issue-based. So as you can see by the slides, we called predominantly in 2 districts with various issues. The Illinois 16th, which is Adam Kinzinger's, and the Illinois 13th, which is Rodney Davis's. Kinzinger was initially chosen for 2 reasons. A, we thought he would be more apt to be influenced than any of the other Republican Illinois Congress people. We were wrong, actually. And B, he is a congressman for the other co-lead of the group, Sarah Bingaman. Rodney Davis was chosen because he's my congressman. By the way, we got the VPB for the from Indivisible National. I applied for it. It was really easy. So thank you very much, Ezra, for that. You rock again, like I said. Since this seemed to get a lot of traction, we then used it to call activists to recruit for the convening. And then we decided that maybe it would be better to write personal emails. So we used a I guess you could call it a writing bank, to write personal emails to activists to recruit for the convening. After the convening, we took a 2-month hiatus. After that, Rose, having worked extensively with the Wisconsin Democratic Party, figured that the rural subgroup and the vote by mail subgroup can combine and collaborate with the Wisconsin Democratic Party, the WisDems, to phone bank to voters in Wisconsin. It's been going very well, asking Democratic voters to apply for their absentee ballots. And starting in April, we are planning also to ask Illinois Democratic voters to apply for their vote by mail ballots. Now, Dale Nook, a Wisconsin activist and organizer who works with the Wisconsin Dems, will explain why the vote by mail group is why the vote by mail group is working with the Wisconsin Dems. Okay, Dale. I wonder if Dale can't unmute. Hey, Rose, can you make him a co-host? Because I think that only hosts can unmute. So I think that's why Dale isn't answering. Oh, by the way, I'll put a link to the phone bank in the chat.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Hi, Dale, you're on.
Yeah, can people hear me now? So, okay, well, the biggest reason we're contacting voters is 98% of the people who register for absentee ballots in Wisconsin vote. And we have a pretty active spring election going on, and we're going to have, after the primary, we're going to have the election April 5th. And then after that, we're going to have a very, very competitive U.S. Senate primary in August. So we're hoping that these particular races will really gin up activity in Wisconsin, and we want to get more people registered to vote. We want to get more people to apply for their absentee ballots. So that's why we're contacting people now with our first February primary, and then later we're going to have the spring elections. And then, as I said, the August primary for the U.S. Senate race will really be heated up, and we'll hopefully get more people involved. And all this will lead toward more participation in November. So we really appreciate the help from Indivisible groups in Illinois, and the collaboration is going very well with lots of participation. So like I said, we're real excited, and we're off and running. Thanks to a lot to Rose and Marcie for their help. And then I'll give it back to Marcie now. So
I think we're on the next speaker.
Yes, and I am going to jump in here. I don't know if Kim is available or not, but if you want to join me, Kim, that would be amazing. I'm going to go through this quickly because I do appreciate that we are, I'd say, out of time, but if you can bear with us, we do have some information that we want to share, and we will close up shortly. So if you remember way back when, we do have another team, a Social Justice Alliance team. This is a team that I lead with Kim Garnett and Jonathan Rogoff. He is the gentleman that I told you about earlier that created the website for us. And also Kathy Ricebrook. Hi, Kathy. Kathy is new to the team, and we are just thrilled that she is on the team now. I'm going to go through this cadence really, really quick because of our time constraints, but jump in if you want to, Kim. I want to let you know, and I think Jim alluded to some of this, the very first Saturday of every month, we address underserved community. The second Saturday, really quickly, I have so much information. You don't know how painful this is for me to make this short. The second Saturday, you'll notice that already, because I know some people may have to leave. I put the link in for that. We've been doing a roadmap to an election for a long time. Started with a roadmap to 2018, 2020, and now, yes, lo and behold, we have 2022. God willing, we'll have a 24. So Swing Left is going to join us on Saturday. Again, I have the link in the chat, and that is Saturday noon Central Time. Something else that you're not gonna want to miss. Something you're really not going to want to miss is what Jim was talking about. He and Joyce have had tremendous audience. You can tell that this is a burning issue for a lot of people. But on the third Saturday, we address school board disinformation. It is something that early on, we provided a platform for because we knew it was going to be critically important. And of course, for our parents, our children, but also for midterm elections, always thinking about winning those midterms. And then on the fourth week, now that the federal legislation has stalled, we have another plan. We always have another plan, and it is massive voter registration as well as voter engagement. And our own organization, I'll Vote, participates on that fourth Saturday, as does Field Team 6. Almost forgot that name, but it's a partner organization getting a lot of really great press. We are promoting the vote not only in Illinois, but also in Wisconsin and swing states. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Ed.
Okay, so we have a number of partner organizations we work with. A few of them are here tonight, and we'll say a couple of words. So we will hear from the first three you see on the slide, but I just want to give a shout out to some of these other organizations. We've worked a lot with Jones Democracy Cafe in phone banking into swing states. We've worked with the Swing Left, WisDems. You've heard from WisDems already. We've worked with Field Team 6. We've actually even been able to do some work with League of Women Voters, which is kind of interesting because they're nonpartisan and they don't really want to formally work with someone quite as partisan as we are. But we have shared membership. In fact, most of these groups have shared membership. I happen to be a member of the League of Women Voters, even though I'm not a woman. And that means that we can get information across. For example, when I was talking about our need to lobby with the Illinois legislature, we can kind of whisper in the ears of the league and they will see the value of what we're talking about and they'll start lobbying the legislature as well. And they have a powerful name. So working with these teams has been helpful. I'd like to turn it over to Bill Davis now to just say a few words about his organization, NWSOFA. Go ahead, Bill.
Hi, hope you can hear me. Ezra, thank you for joining, and to the entire team here. This is just great. I am the chapter co-lead of NWSOFA Indivisible. And for better explanation, that is the Northwest Suburbs OFA Indivisible chapter for the last 4 years. But we've been around for almost 10 years. A better explanation is we're in the land beyond O'Hare. That gives you an idea. We have 5,000 members. We are managed by a volunteer staff of leadership of 24 people that manage our issues and our communications team. We thought we were pretty successful, and then we joined Indivisible 4 years ago. Boy, I'll tell you what, Ezra, this works. Collaboration. Learning from one another, using all the tools. Lenny brought us in. Rose has really helped bring our people into the Indivisible Illinois area, particularly on the Illinois Vote and the Social Justice Alliance. We're proud to have about 10 of our team members, our leadership team members that are part of these areas. This collaboration works. Indivisible works. And it is amazing. We used to have, with our 9 issue teams, we used to have 9 events each month. We thought that was a lot to get our arms around. Now, Indivisible with Rose and with Lenny and their organization have added another 9 events, bringing great content. It is just powerful. Thank you for starting Indivisible. We love how it's growing. Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Lenny.
That's great. Thank you, Bill. I'd like to hand it off to Rosie Reese now. If you could unmute yourself and tell us a bit about Indivisible Evanston.
Hi, Rose asked me to talk about what Indivisible Evanston has done over the past 5 years. That was going to take me a half an hour. So I don't have enough time to do that. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what our plans are for 2022. For the midterms, our goal is to keep Democratic control of the House and increase Democratic majority of the Senate. And to that end, we'll be supporting congressional candidates and urging voters to vote in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan with phone calls, texts, and postcards. We'll be involved again in Wisconsin. We're manning the voter protection hotline, and we're going to serve as poll watchers. We send a newsletter out every single week to 1,000 people, giving them actions they can do every day. And we have a 50% open rate. This month, we'll begin a major postcard campaign to swing states to remind voters what the Democrats have done for them lately and urge them to turn out in November. We'll be writing postcards right up to the November election. And we hope to resume our canvassing efforts in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan this year. Again, Ezra, thank you so much for your support. You inspire me every single time I hear you. So thank you so much for coming tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that we should skip ahead now. We have, let's see here. We have, Rose, were you going to pick up the issue of discussing the ask with?
Are we going to skip over Terry and I'll vote?
Well, Terry doesn't seem to be on. Not Terry. Are
I'm
you?
on.
Oh, great. Well, then go ahead.
I have to put up my slide.
Oh, let me put it up. Thank you. I thought you were having internet problems. Let me get this up for you.
I am having an unstable internet, so if I disappear, you'll know why.
All right.
But I'm not Rosie. At any rate, IL Vote is certified by the Illinois State Board of Elections as a nonpartisan state civic organization for voter registration. It originally covered just the city of Chicago and Cook County, but it's now spread to 9 downstate counties as well. In the Chicago area, it's held numerous voter registration drives at high schools and outdoor events, including last summer's Lollapalooza. But downstate's a little bit different. I run IL Vote of Champaign County, which is about 120 miles south of Chicago and home of the huge University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, plus lots and lots of farmland. We do have a very active League of Women Voters here, which does much of what IL Vote would do. But the one thing they don't do is follow up to make sure those new voters actually vote. After all, you can register all the voters you want, but if they don't actually go out to vote, you've achieved nothing. That's why part of our mission statement here is to increase voter turnout across race, age, gender, income, and education group in every election. To achieve this, I've teamed up with the local chapter of When We All Vote. Together, we've already put on a 4-day virtual voter registration drive over the Martin Luther King weekend with our Facebook pages and social media. It included an easy-to-use QR code to take you to the state's voter registration website, and we had around a dozen fun and educational video clips just to dress things up. Now we're starting discussions on an effort to educate voters about why it's important to vote in our June primary election. There are several local elected offices on that ballot, like county board and circuit judges. Their decisions can have more of an impact on people's lives than what happens in Congress. That's what we want voters to know, and we're deciding on best ways to get that information out to them. And come fall, we'll be out trying to convince the U of I's 55,000 students to change their voter registration to Champaign County. We'll be telling them it's important for them to have a say in who's running the government, where they'll be spending 9 months of a year of their lives. And now it's back to Rose.
Thank you so much, Terry, and thank you, everyone. I recognize that we've gone late, and I am going to try to close it up. And if we could have just an additional commentary from Ezra, I would really appreciate it. So, Ezra, I have a lot of asks, but my team has asked me to try to keep it simple. So I am going to try to do that, but I'm going to tell you my plan B first. My plan B is, wouldn't it be phenomenal if we had voting rights ambassadors throughout all the teams? Just food for thought. But the ask is really more of a comment, to tell you the truth. So obviously, we're all advocating for increased turnout and improved access. And I also want to let you know, I don't see her on my screen, but my friend Sandra Baskin has been absolutely amazing. She has been working with the Rep. Lauren Underwood campaign. That's how we met. She was in actually one of Rep. Underwood's commercials. And I recognize another collaborative effort that Underwood is a part of the Give No Ground. And we would essentially, now that we've kind of taken a breath, I would like you to give some closing remarks, and then I will, after you speak, I will bring us home, I promise, and close this up. Ezra, over to you. Feedback, thoughts, ideas, insights. We like hearing you talk. So.
Oh my gosh, I am blown away. I mean, it was a fire hose of real local power building happening around the state. I mean, it is just, I mean, here, I don't think you could listen to all this, everybody on the call, without just feeling excited for what everybody is accomplishing. Everybody is working with each other, with other organizations, with other startups to figure this out. And this is what we need happening. And like, I will say, it's very clear to everybody on this call that you're not alone because you're working with everybody else. But from my own experience talking with Indivisible groups, and again, blue states, red states, purple states, this is what excites me. This is what gets me going. This is what gives me hope that we're actually going to be able to succeed, because, you know, I've said this again and again, there are more of us than there are of them. Our challenge is organizing us in order to wield that power. And that is exactly what you were doing at the time when it needs to be done. I was reading a piece actually right before we hopped on this call. It was a obituary for Todd Gitlin, who just passed away. He was an academic and an activist, as Michelle Goldberg's, and it ended with a quote from a first century rabbi. It was not granted you to complete the task, and yet you may not give it up. That's how I feel about the work that we are doing. We're not going to finish this work, and we can't give it up. It is our task to keep on building, to work with each other, to build up in our own communities and together nationwide. That's how we're ultimately going to win. And God, I am just so dang proud and honored to be part of this movement with y'all. Thank you for letting me be part of this tonight. Gosh, this is so energizing for me. I hope it is for y'all too.
Ezra, thank you. Please come back often. We're not competitive, but we want you in Illinois as much as possible. You can't tell we're a little competitive, but yes, thank you. You're so gracious. We appreciate it. Hello to Leah and the baby. Thank you for them sharing you with us this evening. So besides thanking you, I want to, of course, thank the Vote by Mail Task Force. They did work tirelessly. They have been for 2 years, but they really wanted to put it on the table for all of us this evening. I want to thank them. I especially want to thank Terry and Ed for all of their help and hard work and organizing. I want to thank all of you. We still are at 42. I'm really excited about that. Attendees, and also want to thank Saskia and Cameron, especially for making this happen with all of your busy schedule and all of your appearances, that you had the opportunity to grace us with your presence and be here with us this evening. And before I close, I want to share with you that event I put in the chat. We're always selling. I have an event, the Roadmap to 2022, on Saturday at noon. I hope you can make it, everybody. And I just want to say I'm finally really closing this time. We've all come such a long way, and part of the messaging that I've been really digesting is that we have to, and Ezra mentioned this too, we have to celebrate it so hard because we have challenge after challenge after challenge. But don't do as I do, do as I say. Just try to take a breath and let's celebrate. We accomplished so much. Can you believe it? 2018, I was an election judge all day, and I came back 2018. I went to my car and I couldn't believe all the folks that had won. 4 of the 5 folks that I had campaigned for won. 2020, wow, I still can't believe it. And 21, yes, we got Georgia on the map. All of us as a country, especially Georgia, and we all know our hard work is not over. We had this convening, and our theme at the convening that all of us worked so hard at was community building and collaboration, and this is what we did tonight. This is how we win. So I'll see you all on the trails. Thank you for being here. Be safe, please, and good night.
Woo!